Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you. I've just started the recording. Thanks for calling in today on the Source Water webinar. My name is Dan Yates. I'm with the Groundwater Protection Council. I'm going to give just a few brief slides, just going to go over some of the nuts and bolts of the presentation today. And then I'll be your moderator throughout the day as well. This is the Source Water webinar. We're focusing today on using Clean Water Act funding for source water protection. And the two co-sponsors today are the Groundwater Protection Council and the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators. I'd like to give some special thanks to the Environmental Protection Agency for providing some grant funding both for this webinar and also supporting other work that the Council does on source water protection. This webinar was not developed in a vacuum. We actually got a lot of feedback from various people on topics. The GWPC Source Water Committee was kind of the catalyst for doing this series of webinars. For this particular webinar, we're partnering with ASDWA. Deidre Mason with ASDWA has done a lot of work, and probably other staff there helping her as well, helping get this program put together. We got some good comments from ACWA, the Association of Clean Water Administrators. That's the group formerly known as a SWPCA. And also some good feedback from the Council of Infrastructure Finance Authorities. I see a few emails coming in with some issues. I will get to those as soon as I've turned over the presentation to someone else. So I'll be responding to you shortly. And again, pre-registration, we had I showed 211 here. When I checked this morning, we actually had 215 registered. So thank you very much for joining. Just some general webinar information. Most of you should be hearing me over your computer speakers. If that works and you're getting the sound just fine, you can do that. That's all you have to do. I've said this several times already this morning. If you are listening on the phone line, please make sure that your phone is on mute. I've got 3 poll questions that we're going to get to, and we'll do those maybe at different parts throughout the webinar, real brief answers. So you'll see those on your screen in place of a PowerPoint. So when those come up, if you'll just click on the most appropriate answer, we'll get to those pretty quickly. For questions for the speakers, we're going to use the GoToWebinar. And so when you logged on this morning, you should have 2 things. You should have a window where you are currently seeing my PowerPoint, and you should also have a little toolbar maybe popped up on the right side of your screen. There's a line for questions. You may have to expand it to open it, but you can type in questions right in there. I see several of you have already put in some questions. And so we will get questions for speakers. I'll be scrolling through those, and we'll get to questions at the very end. Again, if you're having any audio problems and want to get off the speaker line and call the phone line, I'm going to put that number up on your screen real quick. Give me just a second. And you should have received an email from me early this morning that also has that phone number. So here you can see it, 866-777-6650. And then the code is a 9-digit code, 405-516-4973. I'll leave this up here for a couple minutes. And again, if you're just joining us on the phone line, be sure to mute your phone. We're recording this webinar, and this will be available on the GWPC website towards the end of the month. We'll send out a reminder email when it's ready to be viewed, and please feel free to forward that to anyone in your office or anyone you know interested in this topic. Real briefly, just who is the Groundwater Protection Council? We're the National Association of State Groundwater and UIC, Underground Injection Control Agencies. Been around for about 27 years. We have a 25-person board, and those people are all in charge of either a source water or a groundwater or a UIC or an oil and gas program. We do a lot of projects, both related to all related to groundwater protection, but in the realms of source water, oil and gas, UIC. Some of those include our groundwater report. See the website for that online. We do several conferences. You can find out more about our meetings on our website. In the last year, we've developed fracfocus.org, which is a chemical disclosure website for hydraulic fracturing chemicals. And also we do a lot of work in state data management, mostly on the oil and gas side, but we're branching out into some water data management as well, and that is available online on rbdmsonline.org. For today's agenda, again, I'm giving just a short introduction. Next up, we'll have Deidre Mason from ASDWA telling you a little bit about ASDWA and some other source water programs. Then we've got two speakers from EPA's Clean Water Funding, or Clean Water Act side, Stephanie Von Feck and Lynda Hall. And again, if you're joining on the phone, please be sure to mute your phone. You can do that by using *6, or if you've got just a mute button on your phone, that's fine too. We've got two speakers from the Trust for Public Land, Zeiper and Kelly Hart. And then finally, from the state of Washington, Kitty Weismann. So just to put some faces to names, here are me and Deidre, and then our speakers from EPA, Stephanie and Lynda. There's Matt and Kelly from TPL, and finally Kitty Weismann of Washington. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to Deidre Mason. That'll take just a second. And while Deidre's talking, I'll be getting to those questions that you've emailed in.
Okay, Dan, can you see my screen here?
I can see your screen and I hear you.
Great. My name is Deirdre Mason. I'm a project manager for the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators. And ASDWA is a nonprofit organization that represents the drinking water administrators from all of the 50 states, the territories, and the Navajo Nation in Washington, D.C. And our members are responsible for implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act to ensure that all public water systems are in compliance with the regulations. They also provide technical assistance for water utilities, and they were also responsible to ensure that the source water assessments were conducted for all public water systems as part of the 1996 amendments of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Most every state also conducts source water protection activities, which are not a mandatory program requirement. So I'm having trouble changing my slide. Okay, there we go. So ASDWA is part of the Source Water Collaborative, and we work very closely with the Groundwater Protection Council on source water protection issues. We also work with the rest of these organizations that make up the collaborative, including the Association of Clean Water Administrators, which we're happy to have a number of their members and their staff on the webinar today. So, although our webinar today is about using Clean Water Act funding for source water protection, it's not just about funding. And while we're all facing budget constraints, we also want to look at where we can leverage our existing tools, authorities, and resources to do our jobs better. So how can we help each other, and where do our priorities align? Well, if we go back to the source water assessments that were developed for all public water systems as part of the 1996 amendments, you can see here where the source water protection areas have been delineated as part of those assessments. essentially or potentially affect the drinking water quality of the groundwater well. On the right-hand side, we have a watershed protection area where it shows a delineation where everything that happens on the land within this delineated area and in the water upstream of the drinking water intake that is shown down at the bottom right-hand side that has the potential to affect the quality of the drinking water. And these two maps are from Ohio and Wisconsin, and the map on the left shows where Ohio has mapped out its surface water intakes and the associated drinking water protection areas at the HUC 8 scale. On the right-hand side, we have the state of Wisconsin, where they've mapped out the groundwater wells with high nitrate concentrations that are required to treat for nitrate, and overlaid the watersheds where they have impaired waters for total phosphorus. And they've also included in green, if you can see that, the little tributaries or stream segments where they are developing TMDLs. So these are just examples of the types of maps that can be used to highlight where state drinking water, groundwater, and clean water programs can work together to target activities and funding for source water protection, and where our mutual priorities may align. And that's exactly what they've done in the state of North Carolina. The state drinking water program has worked with the Clean Water SRF program to provide priority ranking points for projects in areas with approved source water protection plans. They also are using their CWSRF set-asides, their drinking water SRF set-asides, to provide loans to water utilities for land conservation and drinking water protection activities. And the state drinking water program, their source water protection program there, is also working with USDA, who will provide extra ranking points for farmers enrolling eligible land for conservation and best practices in source water protection areas. So with that, I'll leave you with a picture of a pretty healthy drinking water watershed and turn it over to Dan to introduce the rest of our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre. I got several messages about the echo problem. Hopefully this has taken care of it. If you're still hearing an echo, please go ahead and send me either an email or type it into that question box. Our next speaker is going to be Lynda Hall. Lynda, just hold on a second, and I'm going to be transferring the presentation to you. And Lynda, go ahead and try to speak into your microphone.
Okay, how's this?
You're coming in here, thanks.
Okay.
And I can see your presentation.
Here. Okay, how's that?
It's good, take it away.
Okay. All right, well, hi everyone. I'm Lynda Hall, and I am 2 months in to a new position as the program manager for the 319 program at EPA, the Nonpoint Source Control Branch. That position was held by Dove Weismann for the last 20 years, so I imagine some of you know Dove. And anyway, so it's my pleasure to be able to speak with you today about an overview of the 319 program and some of the ways in which that program can collaborate with other programs to address source water protection concerns and groundwater protection. So to begin with, what is non-point source pollution? It's a category of pollution that continues to evolve because it's essentially defined by whatever is not point source pollution. And of course, point source pollution continues to be redefined as stormwater management regulations are expanded and the size of animal feeding operations covered by federal regulations changes, etc. But some current categories of pollution that are still considered non-point sources are smaller animal feeding operations, smaller stormwater systems, and abandoned mines. It's trouble advancing. Okay. And then in addition, types of non-point source pollution, which I imagine are familiar to many of you. Pollutants from agriculture, excess fertilizers, herbicides, and insecticides. In suburban areas, oil, grease, and toxic chemicals. Sediment is a big problem and a byproduct in many cases of hydromodification that goes on in developing areas and streams. Again, from agriculture, salt from irrigation return flows, and acid mine drainage, not from agriculture, but also acid mine drainage problem in many areas that does not have a point source solution. And then,
hey, Linda, this is Dan. Can I interrupt you real quick?
Animal operations and septic systems.
Linda, would you move your microphone away from your phone a little bit? We're getting a bit of an echo.
Oh, okay. How's this?
That's better.
Okay, sorry about that. And then finally, other sources of non-point source pollution are atmospheric deposition. It could be for nitrogen and phosphorus, for example, as well as metals, and hydromodification. So this is one of a number of different graphs that could be used to show how dominant non-point sources of pollution are. This particular one shows the percent of impaired stream miles. We have different graphs that show lake impairments and others. But the story is largely the same, which is that agriculture as a whole, that includes row crop agriculture and animal operations, is by far the most significant contributor to non-point source pollution problems, followed by hydromodification, which is also widespread, and that's anything that would affect what would be considered the natural flow of water that would keep that system intact. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute in terms of low-impact development in urban areas.
Linda, this is Dan.
You can see the rest of these sources, but clearly agriculture is an area where this program needs to focus and has been focusing. So a little
hey, Linda.
bit of program background. The Non-Point Source program came into being in the Clean Water Act amendments of 1987. And as I'm sure you know, it didn't authorize federal regulations or require state regulation. What it did require was that states conduct assessments of the sources of non-point source pollution and develop management programs. And the second bullet here elaborates on what those management programs can include. A handful of states, large handful of states, do have regulatory programs for various aspects of non-point source pollution, mostly in the area of animal agriculture. But for the majority of states require, on a combination of these other things, technical financial assistance, training, technology transfer, and demonstration projects to manage their non-point source pollution problems. To give you a snapshot on funding, this shows about where things were in the 1990s as states were developing and growing their non-point source programs. That shot up to $100 million in the late 90s, and then there was a period where funding hovered, between $200 million or greater, really for a 10-year period. And this is not a lot of money relative to the size and scope of the problem of non-point source pollution. These funds are allocated to states and territories by an allocation that was developed in the 90s and has not changed since then. And so what this looks like for a small state like $65 million. So it's pretty tough trying to deal with the scope and the magnitude of the problem with this kind of money. So it's very important for us to be strategic as we go about doing that, and I'll describe how we do that in a moment. One point about how the funds are categorized is useful to know. Since 1999, the funds have been categorized in two halves. So of the money that a state gets, half of it has been considered base funds, which can be used for all of those things from the previous slide, statewide approaches, regulatory programs if a state is so inclined, funding state staff, and other kind of broad approaches like monitoring and outreach. And then the other half of the funds, which have been called incremental funds, must be targeted towards the development and more importantly, the implementation of non-point source TMDLs or watershed-based plans. So this slide just gives you a little bit more detail on how those two types of funding are used. So the first couple of bullets would be in the context of watershed-based plans, the implementation of those plans and implementation of projects on the ground to address them. Demonstrating the effectiveness of innovative practices. Their green infrastructure and LID is a great example I'll be covering briefly in a minute of innovative practices that the 319 program has helped to advance, particularly in urban areas. But other uses of the 319 funds are project planning and coordination with other agencies. The projects that do go forward and are successful, and I'm sure you've found this in your own experience, tends to involve a lot of people. There are a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people that need to come to the table to make things happen, especially when you're relying on voluntary participation. So partnerships with other agencies, with the drinking water programs, source water protection programs. NRCS is a huge partner for us, and local conservation districts. Coordinating takes time, and so that's an important use of the base funds that states use to support staff, is just to manage projects and coordinate with other agencies and other sources of funding. You can see the other basic uses of the program funds here. I don't think I need to belabor those. I did want to take a minute to talk about watershed-based plans because they are a cornerstone of the 319 program to the extent that our current guidelines for the 319 grants, which must be followed, are that before a state implements a 319 funded project, so an on-the-ground project, it must develop a watershed-based plan, and we have guidance on what a good watershed-based plan looks like that can be found on the web. But it essentially, it's a document that helps you use funds strategically by identifying what are the load reductions needed, if a TMDL has been done, or what's an approximation of the load reductions needed if there isn't a TMDL, what are the sources of pollutants in the watershed, what are the practices needed to address those pollutants, and if, ideally it would also include funding sources available to put those practices on the ground. So this has been a cornerstone of the 319 program and will continue to be. I wanted to spend just a couple minutes on a particularly important innovation that the Nonpoint Source Control Branch here and the 319 program has been advocating for the last several years, and that's low impact development. And this was a response to a new understanding, I guess, in the late 90s, that while pollutants matter, even in urban and developing areas, hydrology is really the primary driver of many of the water quality problems that result in those areas, and that low impact development addresses this suite of problems in a more comprehensive and holistic way, and does so while having other benefits, including augmenting water supply through better recharge of aquifers, through there can be energy savings through cooling, for example, in cities with green roofs and more trees, and a variety of other water quality benefits. So this is a picture that illustrates the problem of impervious surface and what it does to streams. So with the stream on the left, I don't think these pictures are especially clear, but the stream on the left, shows an intact forested area and stream banks that are in relatively good shape, and a decent amount of water in the stream relative to how wide the channel is. And the picture on the right shows what has happened in a watershed with 20% impervious surface, and it's a big difference. You get flashy runoff that carves into the stream banks. It creates high sediment loads and then widens the channel, makes the water in the stream more shallow over time. That means it's warmer, which has habitat and water quality impacts, and it flushes out habitat for aquatic species and disconnects it from the rest of the hydrological system in important ways. So that's the problem, and low impact development is part of the solution, which is to replace impervious surface with practices that mimic natural systems to infiltrate, evapotranspirate, or otherwise use stormwater runoff. And here are just a few nice pictures to give you a sense for some of these practices. This is a set of green roofs. The numbers can be very impressive in terms of the amount of stormwater that these roofs can retain and keep out of the stormwater system. This is porous asphalt. It's a pretty dramatic photo of where this is an appropriate use. It really helps to get recharge and keep the water from running off and keep it out of the streams. A redo of a parking lot with a bioretention pond, otherwise known as a rain garden, and more vegetated area that helps take in more water and has other benefits, as I mentioned, in terms of cooling and just making an urban area look better. So one other area of emphasis I wanted to mention that is relatively new for the program, and in some sense for EPA in general, is the Healthy Watersheds initiative. This has gotten underway over the last couple of years here in the Nonpoint Source Control Branch. Laura Gabansky is the lead on this, and this is just recognizing with more emphasis that part of the Clean Water Act that talks about preserving and maintaining the waters that are in good condition, and not just focusing on restoration, which has been where most of our programs have focused, and for good reason. But folks felt it was time to rebalance that a little bit and to emphasize the importance of protecting those watersheds and those waters that are still in good condition, and to avoid the expense and the hassle and sometimes the impossibility of restoring those waters. So this effort got underway in the last couple of years, and there was an action plan and framework that was put out in, I think, October of 2011, and there will shortly be a new technical document that distills practices by some states who are leaders in this area and talks about the concepts of preserving healthy watersheds, which is really kind of a broader scale look than restoring waters on a small HUC 12 kind of watershed basis or a segment by segment basis. It's really looking at valuing and preserving whole systems, ecological systems. So it's a very interesting area. We're getting a good foothold and trying to shine a light on good things that states have done there. So I do commend to you in the near future when we put that final document out to take a look at it. And that can be found at epa.gov/healthywatersheds. I'm sorry, I thought I was going to have other slides in here to show you different green infrastructure practices, but I guess I'm in a different version. that were causing the impairment have been addressed. So that's always a great news story when it happens, and we have upwards of 358, I think, of these right now, and more to come. If you wanted to take a look at these as a whole, you could Google 319 success stories, and that would get you right there. But the few that I've highlighted here are those that have some success stories, not all of them, that have also had a source water benefit. And so Mills River, North Carolina, is one. This is the source of water for 50,000 or more people, which was threatened by ag runoff. And a suite of partners got together, and this actually included a source water protection grant from EPA, I believe, as well as funding from 319 and NRCS and other programs. So again, it was a large suite of partners that got together and put in this suite of practices along the river that include the things you see listed here: riparian buffers, 8 or 10 acres of conservation easements, stabilization of the waterway to eliminate some of the sediment that was being delivered. And the outcome of that was that this the Mills River, or the section of the Mills River involved in this case study, was able to be delisted for pollutant impairments. Similar story with the Charleston Side Channel Reservoir in Illinois. This had been or is rather, a source of drinking water that was threatened really just a few years after it was created by lots of sediment. It's very highly farmed area, lots of sediment, phosphorus, and even manganese. And again, a suite of partners did an assessment, and based on a watershed-based plan, did stabilization to reduce the erosion of the sediment banks, installed grass waterways, and a suite of ag conservation practices that was successful in reducing the manganese levels, the sediment, and the phosphorus. It also eliminated odor problems, I guess, that had been a concern because it was a drinking water source. And then the final example, Lake Ikaria, I hope I'm saying that right, in Iowa, was a similar situation and was similarly addressed by a suite of management practices that are described here. So these are three. There were, on one search of our success stories, there were 7 or 8 source water protection cases that came up. I'm sure there are others that are other projects that are underway and just haven't kind of made that magic mark yet of the waters being delisted. But I think just to recap, we do have a lot in common, and there is, I think, good opportunity for collaborating among the programs to get water quality improvements that are also help for groundwater and source water sources. We are a program with many demands and a significantly declining budget, so it's a challenging time in the 319 program right now. But we are committed to being, going forward. We're actually putting in place a number of program enhancements this year that we think will make the program even better in the coming years, and we'll continue the focus on watershed-based planning as part of that. But just some of the commonalities I wanted to note in closing here between our programs is, we definitely have great overlap in program goals, and we are drinking water and water quality are threatened in many cases by the same pollution sources, and the same control practices can help solve the problem. We have a need for watershed-based planning or another strategic way of allocating the resources that we have, so we're spending the money where it can do the most good, and we're also, in many cases, reliant on voluntary actions and engage local stakeholders and building those partnerships. So in closing, I'll just say I think there's great opportunity for collaboration. Some of that is clearly going on at the state level, and the state Nonpoint source coordinators are a really good place to start if you haven't made those connections yet and wanted to. And there's a list at this website where you can find the folks in your state who are coordinating the 319 program. So with that, I think I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'm going to mute you now. And then, Stephanie, are you on the phone? Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Fabulous. Linda's switching over to my presentation right now. Can you see it?
I can see it.
Fabulous. Well, I want to say thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to focus on another part of the Clean Water Act, which is the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. It's a rather mature program. It's been around for more than 20 years, and similar to 319, its mission is to protect water quality. And indeed, it dovetails quite nicely with the 319, which I'll explain later. In addition, as Linda pointed out, while its origin was in the Clean Water Act, its focus, it has a shared water protection efforts in that we're all addressing elimination of pollution sources and improving sources of water quality. I'm going to provide a brief overview to the program that I hope will spark your interest in working with the SRF in your state to bring source water protection projects to the program for funding. This schematic basically outlines how the SRF program works. If you think about it very simply, it's an environmental bank that's operated in every state and Puerto Rico. If you look on the left-hand side, progressing towards the right-hand side, EPA provides capitalization grants every year since the inception of the program. States contribute a 20% match, and that goes into those arrows that are circling one another. That's the revolving loans. Some states augment those funds with leverage proceeds from the bond market, but we won't explore that now. The state, which is basically represented by those circling arrows, then makes loans at 0 to just below market rate interest to several different kinds of eligible projects that really span a very broad spectrum of water quality issues. The recipients implement their project, which is represented by the assistance recipient. Kind of looks like a drinking water treatment plant and storage facility to me here. And then they are responsible for repaying their loan over generally 20 years, although with small non-point source projects occasionally states will establish shorter time frames, really depending on the project. It is the repayment of those loans supplemented by continued federal capitalization that provides the revolving nature of this program. It is intended to have funds available into perpetuity to address the broad range of water quality projects. And because we're talking about source water protection here, I wanted to highlight the types of projects that I think would spark your interest. These are all eligible if they are included in a state's 319 management plan or watershed plan that Linda just finished talking about. That is indeed the authority that most directly overlaps with the source water protection program. And I won't belabor what's on this list, but you can skim through and see the types of projects that would occur in some of the source water protection areas that Deidre highlighted for us earlier in the presentation. To give you a feel for both the size of the program, it's provided almost $90 billion in assistance. And as well as the types of projects that it's implemented, you see the majority of the funding has gone for wastewater collection and treatment, as well as sanitary sewer overflow, abatement, and combined sewer overflow correction. A growing percentage is the stormwater area that Linda mentioned, and it's represented by the black wedge as well as the red wedge purple, which represents the non-point source and estuary uses of the program, which now has added up to 6% of total funds over the period of the entire program. Just for a little bit of background, 40 states out of the 51 programs have funded Nonpoint just since 2006. And indeed, over the course of the program, a total of 45 states have used the funds for these non-point source projects. Just to give you a feel for the type of funding that's generally available every year from both loans that have been repaid as well as new capitalization, grants from the EPA as well as state match, and leverage funds. The states are loaning in aggregate $5 and $6 billion a year for the last handful of years. We had a spike with the stimulus funding. We got an unprecedented $4 billion in that program, but generally, you know, the amount is not quite as large as that. Talking about priority setting, Linda highlighted that in North Carolina, the drinking water program had worked with the SRF to add priority points to the ranking system that the state is using to rank projects for funding. We're in a situation where there's generally more demand for funding than there is available in a given year. And so getting involved with the state's priority ranking system and making sure that source water protection interests are reflected is a very important step that you might take. Some states are already using their funds in this manner, and that'll be a very easy connection for you to make. Other states have been focused on wastewater treatment and collection, and so there might be an adjustment that you would be looking to implement so that it aligns with, you know, the major impairments that are in that state. In some states, the major impairments are very resource-oriented. In others, it's a broader range. And so you'll want to share the information you have with your state program. As I said, states are responsible for prioritizing the applications and making the loans. And so the relationship between the project is really with the state, not with EPA. A major influence on the program over the last 3 years since the stimulus program and the appropriation since has been a requirement that was very new. It's the first time that we've been required to use a portion of the funds for particular kinds of projects. These are in aggregate called the Green Project Reserve, and you can see the details there, but it's basically focused on states funding green stormwater infrastructure, and projects that address hydro modification are included in there. Water efficiency and water reuse, energy efficiency and renewable energy, most of those are at POTW, as well as environmentally innovative projects. And that includes decentralized wastewater treatment. So where you have failing septic tanks and you need to upgrade them to ensure that they're working or enhance the treatment to remove the nutrients or other concerns, that's where those projects would fit. I wanted to run through a couple of issues that you're probably going to encounter when you work with the state on the SRF program. If you'll remember, the majority of the funding has been used for wastewater collection and treatment projects. So the folks there working in the state are very accustomed to large projects with user fees that provide an easily identifiable revenue source to repay the loans. Whereas non-point source and the source water protection projects are very different. They're generally smaller, but require a similar amount of work to, you know, bring to fruition. Sometimes there isn't a readily identifiable revenue stream or creditworthiness is a concern. If you're working with a program that employs wastewater engineers, they may be unfamiliar with green infrastructure and source water protection projects. Also, I find that many non-point source projects are looking for grants, and we have a very limited availability of a grant-like mechanism. We don't call them grants. and you can see there the amounts of funding that have been available. So those are the challenges, and I would never put the challenges in front of you without showing you the solutions for those. Before I move on, though, one of the key misunderstandings of the SRF program is that the repayments do not need to come from the project itself. We've had wetland protection projects where the revenue source comes from hunting and fishing licenses. You have membership dues for not-for-profits that have been used for loans in the past, and really the list goes on and on. So as we moved into the next section, I want you to start thinking very creatively, and that's what many of our states and project partners have done. So to address some of the challenges I mentioned, states have entered into partnerships. They're often with county governments, soil and water conservation districts, even local banks. The states generally provide the funding through either a loan or, in the case of banks, a deposit. And the partner takes on the responsibility of funding the project and collecting the repayments. In addition, partners such as the soil and water conservation districts, departments of agriculture, departments of health at the county level, often take over responsibility for the technical review of the projects to ensure that they are indeed high priority projects and that they are designed in a way that meets all the regulations and will actually work. Every state that I'm aware of uses partnerships like this for their non-point source funding programs because it number one, provides funding to entities like county governments and soil and conservation districts who might have responsibility for a particular water quality issue, but maybe not the funding. And so they see this as an opportunity to direct funding towards the kinds of water quality projects that are of concern. They have the staff often to administer those very small loans. Often they take the responsibility for repayment, so credit worthiness is no longer an issue, and they bring their expertise to the table in the review of the projects. In the case of banks, they are bringing their expertise to the table in terms of credit evaluation. So by bringing these different partners in, you're actually augmenting and improving the state program. And it's been extremely successful in quite a number of states that are doing source water protection and non-point source funding. I wanted to point out one more item before I move on to the next idea, and that is that because the SRF funds revolve, once they have been loaned out and they come back as repayments, they no longer carry a federal badge, if you will, and can be used to match other federal grants if that other federal program allows it. And so they have been combined with 319 grants to make more money available to non-point source projects or even to satisfy the state match requirement in that program. I'm aware that I think it's been used in both a bridge loan capacity as well as match for some of the agricultural funding programs. One of the most creative solutions I've seen in recent years was created by the state of Ohio, who I believe often looks towards what they're trying to achieve in water quality and then backs their way into the solution. What they want to do in many cases is to preserve high priority water bodies, high water quality water bodies that are in the path of some type of endangerment, and they want to preserve the land or protect that wetland, and that preserves that perhaps are owned by the land conservancies. And so they looked at the program and decided that what they would do is offer their wastewater projects an incentive to sponsor these projects. So the wastewater utility, I call them POTWs for publicly owned treatment work, agrees to add the cost of the Nonpoint source project to their loan in return for a reduced SRF interest rate. The user fees that the POTW earns for its service are used to repay the loan in full, and the project principal and interest costs are the same for the POTW, or even slightly lower than what they would have had with a normal SRF loan at the normal SRF. In this case, though, because it has a lower interest rate, they have the money to pay for the Nonpoint source project, and the Nonpoint source project itself has no repayment responsibility. This is a very useful approach for funding projects in a state priority watersheds that don't have a readily available revenue streams to repay the loan. And since its inception, I think that at least 5 other states that I know of have adopted this approach. I'd like to end with an example, just one because there are so many, of how the SRF has been used to protect source water. In Cohasset, Massachusetts, they have taken their drinking water from Lily Pond since the 1880s. And the project that was funded used almost $500,000 in an SRF loan with a 2% interest rate to fund 40 rain gardens and vegetated swales. The idea here was to capture the first flush of the most polluted stormwater, and then the remaining stormwater that is not captured, it has less of an impact on Lily Pond, and consequently the drinking water quality of the pond is improved. So this is just one example of how the SRF and source water protection efforts have a common goal, and actually the SRF is very supportive of the goals of the source water protection program. At the end of the webinar, I understand we'll be taking questions, and I encourage you to ask questions. Also, if you want to explore ideas and find out who to contact in your state, please feel free to contact myself or Kelly Kunert. Kelly actually has the lead while I'm on a temporary assignment. So I encourage you to talk with her. And think about how you would like to see SRF in your program used, and ways that you can help your state identify projects as well as deliver the funding to the projects that are going to have a common benefit for both water quality and source water protection. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take just a real quick, about a 30-second break, and I'm going to launch one of these webinar questions. So you'll see that on your computer screen. If you'll just click the most appropriate answer, I'm going to time this starting now for 30 seconds, and then we'll move on.
Hey, Dan, this is Kitty. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Kitty.
I hear a lot of breathing and a lot of background noise. Can we remind everyone to put the phones on mute if they're connecting via phone?
Yes, that's a great question. So please, everyone, if you're calling in on the conference line, be sure to mute your phone. If you've got a mute button on your phone, that's the best way to do it. If you don't have a mute button, you can hit *6, and that should mute your phone so we don't hear your side conversations and drinking coffee and those sorts of things. Okay, I don't see any more answers coming in, so we're going to start with the next presentation, which will be Matt and Kelly from TPL. Guys, give me just a second, and I will make you the presenter.
This is Matt Zeiper. Am I the presenter now, Dan?
You are the presenter, Matt. You should get a little pop-up on your screen that asks you to accept.
Show my screen?
There it is.
Okay.
I see it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is Matt Zeiper. I'm the Research Director for the Trust for Public Lands Conservation Finance Program. And I'm joined by Kelly Hart, who is the Director of TPL's Land and Water Program.
Matt, I don't hear you on the phone. Are you called into the phone line as well?
No, I'm not. I'm now just on the computer.
Are you able to call into the line at the same time?
I'll have to run and get a phone, but if Kelly wants to jump on, then I can go do that.
I know we've got a lot of people who are probably just listening in on the phone.
Okay.
So if you've got a second.
Yeah, I'll have to, it's going to take me a second to get a phone.
While we're waiting for Matt, I'm going to go ahead and put up another poll question. Hey, everybody on the phone and on the computer, we're going to wait for Matt to get a phone turned on so you guys on the phone can hear him. So I've popped up another phone question. If none of these topics are of interest to you, or if you have others that are of interest to you, feel free to send me an email about that, or even just post a question or a chat here on the webinar.
Dan, this is Kelly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kelly.
Do you want me to go ahead and start while Matt's finding a phone?
If it doesn't make a difference in the order of presentation, that would be great.
That's totally fine.
And then, are you speaking into the microphone as well?
I am now. I'm speaking to the microphone and the telephone.
Perfect. Okay.
Computer microphone and the telephone microphone.
Okay. Let me end this poll. And then, Kelly, do you have a PowerPoint presentation as well?
I do not have a PowerPoint. I'm only going to talk for like 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, then, carry on.
Okay. So, my name is Kelly Hart. I'm with the Trust for Public Lands, and I'm going to talk really briefly about how the Clean Water SRF has been discussed as part of a multi-year project sponsored by the U.S. EPA. We began this project about 3.5 years ago. It's a collaborative effort of 4 organizations to assist state agencies
in improving alignment on the related issues of clean water, drinking water, land conservation, and smart growth. The 4 of us have some expertise in each of these areas, and the 4 project leads are the Trust for Public Land, the Smart Growth Leadership Institute, the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, and River Network. I guess I want to stop for a second and make sure. Are we getting any feedback because of my duo approach here with the microphones? It's okay.
Kelly, it sounds pretty good. You might just move your microphone away from your phone a little bit, and if you've got your speakers turned on, go ahead and turn those way down.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so for this project, the way it works is that states apply to work with us, essentially. They let us know which alignment issues they want us to tackle. So we've worked with 7 states so far, and the Clean Water SRF has emerged as an area of interest in 2 states, North Carolina and Missouri. So I'll talk very briefly about each, but I'm just going to give the high-level points. So I'm going to start with North Carolina. And by way of background, the public water supply section of the North Carolina DENR really did an extensive evaluation of its source water protection areas across the state. So just with that as background, we made 3 recommendations for enhancing the Clean Water SRF. They all pertain to the way that applications for SRFs are prioritized. And Deirdre, in her opening remarks, sort of touched upon actually the progress that's been made since we worked on this project together. So, but anyway, the states have criteria, and awards are determined by how well those criteria are met.
So there is a point-based system for determining applicants' relative priority to another. We recommended 3 modifications to the priority ranking system. First, we thought that the water SRF should provide additional ranking points for projects that directly benefit waters that are drinking water sources in North Carolina, CWS1 through 4, as well as those that are highly susceptible to stormwater
that had already adopted similar priority ranking factors for their funding programs, including the NRCS EQUIP program, NC Clean Water Management Trust Fund, and the North Carolina Division of Soil and Water Conservation. So that was our first recommendation. The second was that they allow points to accumulate when the factors that I just mentioned exist. For example, if there's a high quality water, that's 5 points. If that water is also classified as a water source 3, a drinking water supply 3, for which there's a source water protection plan. That would on its own be worth 2 points. Under the old system, basically you would only get credit for the first 5 points and not the second 2 points. And so we recommended that you could accumulate and get more points so that those drinking water projects would basically get better standing among applicants. So projects benefiting water supply that are highly susceptible and have approved source water protection plans should get extra points. Our third recommendation in North Carolina was that the ranking system should allow for points related to land conservation projects that would cost effectively achieve multiple benefits for water quality and for other community objectives. The ranking system already had points in it if the proposed project would tackle stream restoration to protect riparian buffers, but it didn't recognize or award points for proposed projects that would simply protect riparian buffers. In a way, this gets at something that Lynda talked about already, the EPA Healthy Watershed Initiative, and the concept is consistent with that in that it emphasizes preserving good quality water and the land that supports them. So utilities that wish to partner with land conservation organizations to reduce pollution in the same watershed should be allowed to count land preservation through purchase or easement as part of their overall integrated water quality management regime. So these were the recommendations around the Clean Water SRF priority ranking system. And those were just among many other topics that the team covered with the North Carolina agency representatives, Jay Frick and Amy Axon of the NCDE&R. So I have, I think, a minute or two remaining, so I wanted to talk ever so briefly about our state demonstration with Missouri. We're still in process of developing and sharing recommendations with the Missouri team. Our main contact is Jane Davis in the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. The current Clean Water SRF program in Missouri is impressive. They do a great job of leveraging their Clean Water SRF dollars. They issue state bonds backed by Clean Water SRF cash flows. In a recent review of how states manage their Clean Water SRFs, Missouri ranked 6th in amount leveraged between 1988 and 2009. Our recommendation here is around encouraging the Missouri Clean Water SRF to support more projects that tackle non-point source pollution issues and to work with non-traditional partners like land conservation organizations. So a couple of points on this. One, the Missouri Clean Water SRF is legally able to make loans to nonprofits. This provides flexibility in the way that funds can be loaned in support of non-point source projects. For example, the state could continue to work through public agencies such as sewer districts to provide the support, or they could engage directly with nonprofits to fund a variety of non-point source projects. Under the Green Project Azure that Stephanie mentioned, the state can issue grants or loans with principal forgiveness in order to make the funds more appealing to groups like land conservation organizations that are more interested traditionally in grants than loans. Well, there are some exceptions. So there are two ways this could happen. One is to establish a late deposit loan program under the Clean Water SRF. Iowa already has this. It's a way to effectively outsource non-point source pollution prevention, loan evaluation, and administration to private banks. The Clean Water SRF program takes out a CD from the bank at a low rate, and the bank then loans on to the borrower at a higher, but still usually below market rate. Often the Clean Water SRF CD receives 0% interest, for example, while the bank lends at a 2 to 3% interest rate to a non-traditional borrower. The trick here is really getting the banks to agree to do this. And the second sort of way, and the second idea about how to work with a non-traditional partner is to do a grant sponsorship program like what exists in Ohio, but I'm not going to go into any detail on that because Stephanie discussed it already. So in closing, there's some, at least 3 types of issues that we're going to need to address with these recommendations for Missouri and as we work through these ideas with their agency staff. The first is around legal constraints. Are there legal constraints that would prevent the state from providing funds under the Clean Water SRF? And a recent review from looking at how states manage their Clean Water SRFs, there do not appear to be legal hurdles in Missouri on this point. Another round of issues is around financial and economic issues. Are there sufficient funds to support non-traditional projects? We know that the Green Project Reserve in this year will be requiring a 10% set aside for non-traditional projects anyway, for non-point source projects, but it also looks like Missouri could dedicate, these funds or more to they raise through leveraging the Clean Water SRF cap grants to water resource protection purposes, while leaving the base funds for traditional projects. There's questions around whether or not non-traditional borrowers create a credit risk, and there's ways to address those we'll be discussing with the Missouri team. And then there's also a set of issues around technical and administrative concerns. Will transaction costs be high, and are there going to be cross-cutting federal requirements such as NEPA? So some states have already have addressed these constraints, so we'll be looking to the best practices of other states, such as Iowa, which uses revolved capital and can work within that constraint and doesn't trigger any NEPA requirements. So that was a really fast run through, and I apologize it was so brief, but I wanted to leave plenty of time for that. And if you'd like more information about the state demonstration grant program, particularly those projects that are already complete, such as North Carolina, feel free to visit our website, our project website, which is landuseandwater.org. Thanks so much. Matt, I think that I hear you coughing in the background. Are you ready?
Actually, it was not me coughing, but I am ready. And thank you. Can people hear me?
We can hear you, Matt. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Hopefully I can advance to the next slide. Not sure.
Matt, try the up and down arrows on your keyboard.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Oh.
Hey guys on the phone, I can hear a side conversation, so please mute your phone. Thanks.
Yeah, it definitely says show my screen. Okay, and now
Matt, I can see your screen and your cursor moving around.
I just can't. It's not advancing the slides. It's still on this one slide of the Connecticut River.
Can you right-click on the picture and advance it that way? Someone else suggests using your page down button.
Okay, I'll try that. Nope. That's very strange.
You may want to just close your PowerPoint and reopen it.
Yeah, I will do that. So. Can't do anything. Oh, there it goes. Okay, do people see a bar graph now?
Do.
Dan?
Yes. We do.
Okay, great. Okay, I just wanted to start with this slide. Again, my name is Matt. rivers, lakes, and streams is the number 1 and 2 reason that voters in the United States are willing to open up their pocketbooks and support increased taxes and borrowing to support land conservation. So it's fundamental just to start out with that, because this is not something that doesn't resonate with the public. The public gets this. And so when we think about where are funds, and specifically we looked at the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, are the values that the public is interested in reflected in the use of those funds, and is there some way, given the political popularity of land conservation that protects water quality, can that be reflected through how these Clean Water State Revolving Funds are used? Obviously recognizing what the program is about traditionally. So let's go on to the next one. So about 2 years ago, we commenced on a report to specifically look at this question. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation asked us to examine what's the potential of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to increase its investments in land conservation that address non-point source pollution. This picture of the report on the screen, this is a report that was released last October, and one that we can certainly make available, happy to make available to everybody on this webinar. We went through a pretty rigorous process. We reviewed all kinds of data, and this is a very well documented program. What's shorthand, the NIMS data that EPA maintains has voluminous information on how each state uses its SRF funds. We zeroed into about a dozen states, a cross-section across the country, and we looked at both the laws and regulations that govern the programs, the intended use plans, which spell out how a fund will use its money each year, and then we sat down and talked with people who run these programs, the CWSRF administrators. This is now an old and sad-looking slide compared to the one Stephanie showed, so the percentages have changed a little bit. Hers was at 94 and 6%. But, there's a small slice there of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund that supports non-point source. And land conservation is just a subsection of non-point source. So, fundamental question driving our research: why have most states not used their clean water SRF capital to address non-point source? What are the leading states doing with regards to using their SRF for non-point source pollution? And how does land conservation fit into this picture? Many of the best practices that we have uncovered, I'm happy to say, echo what Stephanie brought up and what Kelly also discussed, so I'm going to fly through those or jump over them completely so you don't hear those for a third time. That's the danger of going towards the end of the webinar. Fundamentally, you can only support land conservation using the Clean Water SRF if it fits into the state's non-point source management plan. So that's sort of a fundamental starting point. Now I'm going to talk about just some of the best practices that we have seen. Who's using their Clean Water State Revolving Fund to support land conservation, which, again, as Kelly referenced earlier, this fits exactly into this healthy watershed idea that Linda brought up before. And we're delighted to learn of that and interested to see how this proceeds this could be a kickoff of a lot more states' interest in this, in the use of the Clean Water SRF for land conservation. So there's about four states that have a program that supports land conservation with their Clean Water SRF. And then there's a handful of states that have done several or one-off projects. The Ohio Water Resource Restoration Program, that is directly, that is what Stephanie von Feck was talking about earlier from EPA. The Georgia Land Conservation Program is a program that Georgia segregated about $50 million, $55 million into a specific fund to create a loan program just for land conservation from its SRF. The Virginia program is a program that's not that well used, but it has supported a variety of land conservation projects. New Jersey has historically had about 5 to 10 projects every year through the Environmental Infrastructure Finance Program, making loans to local governments and some water suppliers, although that has tailed off in recent years. New York has done some very large loans to both New York City DEP to protect land in the Catskills that are its watershed, as well as some of the local governments on Long Island who have significant sole source aquifers out in Suffolk County. There's also some innovative projects in California that the Conservation Fund and that the Nature Conservancy have done, where they have used timber proceeds to pay back some of these land conservation loans. And then the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation has had a program essentially tailored to their efforts to protect land in Iowa, where they have had a source of bridge funding and now kind of a larger pool that lets them get involved in land conservation projects and allows them to mobilize their resources quickly and then pay them back. So I'm going to jump through some more of these. Here's another innovative project in Massachusetts. In this case, this was a local water supply that the Clean Water SRF role was to fill a gap in a very large watershed project. Of a $10 million project, roughly, $600,000 was to a loan to a municipal water supplier. The critical creditworthiness question that came up earlier, a city with a set of water-paying customers is a very good credit risk. Here's an example of a innovative project in Ohio. This is for a this is part of a private development where the developer received a little more than $1 million in Clean Water State Revolving Fund loans and protected a large riparian corridor and used the funds to defray the cost of their development in terms of their stormwater management they provided in a natural way on site. And so this is an example that I have shared with a number of people, green developers, who seem very excited in other states to figure out if this is an option for them. Okay. Here's an example of a stormwater utility in Washington State. Again, had a reliable source of repayment in terms of a stormwater utility fee that it could pay back this loan. And let me jump down a little bit more. And then a primary area of our work at the Trust for Public Land is working with local governments to create new dedicated sources of public funds. And you can see here's a number of local governments that they have dedicated funds in the form of sales and real estate transfer taxes. And they are able to accelerate their land conservation activity through the, in this case, the Clean Water SRF in New York. And you know, a key unresolved question for both New York and some other states is what's the role that political leadership plays, in this case in the form of former Governor Pataki, in making these loans possible. This is the Georgia program I mentioned earlier, a program that very innovative in that they used their Clean Water SRF to establish a new loan program, but a program that has been pretty undersubscribed so far. This is the Ohio program that Stephanie mentioned earlier, the Water Resource Restoration Sponsorship Program. It's These funds are heavily oversubscribed in some states, and we have found that the existence of leverage provides more of a pool of funding to make these projects available. I just reviewed a state's regulations and statutes today, a New England state that does not have the legal authority to lend for non-point source, does not allow for private entities to borrow. So right there, if those are considerations for how to expand the use of a clean water SRF for land conservation, there are easily identified roadblocks. Whether they're easy to solve is another thing. I'm going to jump down because I want to make sure that our final speakers have time. Jump past this. Again, these were alluded to earlier. This is not, evaluating land conservation is not fundamentally what Clean Water State Revolving Fund programs do. So finding a way to provide technical expertise through partnerships, I think, is a good way to increase the comfort level and the ability of the state Clean Water SRF to evaluate non-point source and land conservation. So when we looked at, after going through this whole exercise of looking at what are the best practices, what are some of the challenges, we came up with really 3 approaches to how you could increase the use of clean water SRFs for land conservation. There's a whole array of incremental approaches, from sponsorships to link deposits to partnerships to having a specific set aside. And we think those will all, on the margins, increase the use of the clean water SRF for land conservation. Again, in a marginal way, which I think in some states could be very significant if they're not doing much now. We also, at the other end of the spectrum, had what we call a big bang idea. Is there, again, this is a very politically provocative idea, is there a way to meet pollution abatement requirements through financing on-point source, and to require for treatment works borrowers borrowing $50 million, require them to borrow an additional amount in terms of non-points, in terms of funding for non-point source projects, be they land conservation or other projects. So if you are going to be tackling a very large infrastructure project, CSO interceptor, treatment plant, sewer line upgrade, at the same time to also be supporting non-point source projects, and that to have repayment financed by the ratepayers of the utility, which addresses the credit risk, the transaction costs, etc. Again, very provocative. One of the ideas we're exploring, and I think is beyond the scope of any state, is the cost effectiveness of non-point source pollution projects, land conservation, restoration, or otherwise, in terms of extending the life of infrastructure. I'm going to be done in 1 minute. Sort of a middle-of-the-road option. Again, we love the Ohio model, this restoration sponsorship program. The state of Ohio has made a commitment by providing these sponsorship agreements to forego about, in recent years, it's been about $15 million a year in interest in order to subsidize the restoration sponsorship programs. We think it's terrific. It creates this sponsorship agreement which in some cases looks like a grant and is appealing to appealing to entities who may not have the reliable source of repayment. But again, it takes a willingness of a state fund to forego a certain amount of interest. In terms of next steps, one that we are involved in at TPL, we have received additional funding to explore the idea of forest conservation and how it can play a role in whether there's significant forest conservation projects that could be funded under Clean Water SRF that are linked to high quality, to protection of high quality watersheds. We're targeting the states that have a track record of using their Clean Water SRF for land conservation And the fundamental challenge we face, and what we heard loud and clear from Clean Water SRF administrators, is you need to make sure there's demand for these programs. We need to find out who would want to borrow from the Clean Water SRF for land conservation. And so I'm going to wrap up with this. I mean, we are trying to explore what are the high priority watersheds that have significant unfragmented forested parcels that could contribute to the protection of water quality. And then can we identify likely borrowers from the list you see in front of you, land trusts, private developers, forest owners that would want to borrow to protect land using the Clean Water SRF. So that project is just getting underway. Kelly Hart and I are working on it, and we'd be happy to have follow up with anybody here who's interested in learning more.
Great, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, Matt. Thank you. Kitty, are you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Everybody, we are, as you can tell, running a little bit over. We've got one presenter left, so a couple of things. If you need to roll off of this call, that's completely understandable, but we've got one more presenter left if you want to hang in there. And then also, we're going to suspend the Q&A part of this, and what we're going to do is we're going to get all the questions that were submitted to the speakers. We'll get them to answer them to us via email, and then we'll compile that. We'll email that all out to you. So if you're hanging on the phone waiting for a question to be answered, you're going to get that question answered via email. And so our next presenter is Kitty Weismann from the state of Washington. You should be seeing Washington State Clean Water SRF and 319 programs on your screen right now.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just let you know when to advance the slide for everyone who's on the line. We're having some extreme weather in Washington. I'm not in my office. I'm in my home. There's a slight chance I'll lose my phone connection, in which case you can refer to the slides at a later date. But the other thing about that is my co-presenter was to be Jeff Najedli, who's with my partner agency, the Washington Department of Ecology. I'm with the Washington State Department of Health Office of Drinking Water. And Jeff couldn't be on the line because of our storm. So, so I'm presenting his part, although he played a huge role in putting the presentation together. I'm going to try to be brief. The Department of Ecology, their mission is to protect Washington's environment, and that includes air, water, and land. And Jeff works for the Department of Ecology, and he manages the Water Quality Financial Assistance Program, which uses Clean Water State Revolving Fund and 319 funding and other funding that's leveraged by those programs. And then what I do is I'm the Source Water Protection Program lead for Washington State, and my funding is Drinking Water State Revolving Fund set-asides and Clean Water Act 106 funding. The focus of this presentation is on Clean Water State Revolving Fund. At the very end, if I have time, I'll talk just briefly about Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Dan. Are you on slide 3?
I am on.
Dan?
Yes, with emphasis on. Kitty, yes, I'm on the slide that starts emphasis on wastewater and stormwater.
Great. Okay, so the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and 319 programs in Washington State benefit drinking water because the Department of Ecology has a very, very forward-thinking approach and a very cutting-edge program, not because of any previous coordination between their agency and my agency, unfortunately. That's starting to change because Jeff and I are coordinating pretty closely now, but only just recently on source water protection. What the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and 319 program does is there's a one set of guidelines and one application for all projects, not just the ones that benefit source water protection. The emphasis in this program is primarily on wastewater and stormwater infrastructure, and that's about 80% of the funds. And the remaining 20% go to Nonpoint source pollution management and on-site septic repair and replacement projects. So there's one set of guidelines for all of those programs, one application, one ranked funding list, and then these funds are leveraging other funding sources such as EQIP and a state funding program we have here called the State Centennial Clean Water Fund. Next slide, Dan.
Okay, go ahead.
So the focus of Jeff's program, the Washington State Financial Assistance Program for Water Quality, is for that 20% that's focused on non-point projects. The focus is to fund best management practices that provide the greatest degree of water quality improvement, and this is reflected in the application guidelines, and that is the eligibility and scoring criteria. And what they've done, what the Department of Ecology has done, is they've written into the guidelines and the scoring wellhead protection and public health improvement emphasis. So if a project is going to protect groundwater and do wellhead protection in any way, or benefit public health in any way, they will get extra points for that project. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
So there are 4 different types of projects that we wanted to give you examples for, and these are source water protection projects again. One is the direct seed no-till local loan project. The other is on-site septic repair and replacement through a local loan program. And the third is wastewater treatment, reclamation, and aquifer recharge. And that's an ARA project, a stimulus project we'll talk about with the Green Project Reserve, which I'll talk about in just a sec. And then non-point source pollution control. So the next slide, please.
Okay.
So the Direct Seed Local Loan Program is operated by an Eastern Washington County Conservation District, the Spokane Conservation District. But even though that is the entity that's managing the program, it actually benefits 14 Eastern Washington counties, which is pretty significant. This particular project uses 319 agricultural best management practices funding, and it's focused on converting farm practices from regular tillage to direct seed or no-till, and that's about $18 million in Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan funding since 1995. So this is an ongoing project that continues to receive funding from Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And it's got really significant water quality protection benefits, reduction in sediment, associated nutrients and pesticide runoff that impact surface water quality and indirectly groundwater quality. The benefits to the farmer are significant as well. Reduced costs to the farmer, really significant reduced costs, improved yields, agricultural yields over time. And this program, even though it's been in place for a while, is just now starting to take off pretty significantly as well. And Department of Ecology and the Spokane Conservation District are touting these economic benefits to the farmers and getting more farmers to sign on. So that's pretty exciting. The program provides low-cost loan terms for farmers to purchase equipment, direct till equipment, to convert to direct seed. The next one, next slide, Dan, is on-site sewage repair and replacement example. And this is, again, a loan program funded through Clean Water State Revolving Fund and some 319, I believe. And in Washington State, failing on-site sewage systems have been linked to source water protection problems, source water contamination problems. And what Jeff's program does is provide local loan funds to county health departments. 9 counties are currently participating throughout Washington State, mostly in the Puget Sound area, and providing loans and grants to homeowners to convert or replace their on-site failing on-site septic systems. And we've had a lot of great success with this program protecting groundwater quality. And since 1995, about $20 million in Clean Water State Revolving Fund loans and $7 million in grants have been provided for this program, and it continues. So that's a great example too. The third one, if you can change the slide, Dan, is the stimulus project, the ARA project, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act project that I mentioned, for water reclamation and aquifer recharge at the city of Airway Heights in eastern Washington, Spokane County. Their wastewater treatment plant. They submitted a project to combine improvements to their wastewater treatment plant with aquifer recharge, water reclamation. And the benefit there, of course, is recharging groundwater with treated, clean water from the treatment plant. And I think that there's an extra benefit here, which Jeff probably could explain better than I could, that has to do with failing on-site sewage systems that are also being replaced at the same time this project is going forward. So there's kind of a double benefit to groundwater, keeping contaminants out and recharging the aquifer. And that, again, is a green project reserve project through the stimulus program. Then the fourth one, you can change the slide, Dan, is Nonpoint source pollution abatement. And this project is focused on best management practices, or this program is focused on best management practices to improve riparian buffers and to restore stream banks, primarily for surface water quality, keeping livestock out of waterways. I should mention in Washington we have about 215 drinking water sources around the state that are pulling from surface water. So surface water improvements definitely can benefit some drinking water systems around our state. And this one is primarily, again, agricultural best management practices, manure management, and then stormwater retrofit and low-impact development. And it looks like about nearly $100 million has been provided through state funds and Clean Water State Revolving Fund money. So the next slide, Dan. So those four examples are just various ways that our Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan program and our 319 program are leveraging other funds to provide assistance to various non-point pollution projects around the state. We aren't doing very much with land conservation yet. I'm really interested to hear what Trust for Public Land had to say, and going back to Jeff and talking a little bit about how we might do better with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about how my program, the drinking water program and the clean water program, are coordinating on source water protection. And what we're doing is we talk regularly about the Clean Water and 319 funding guidelines and application. Until recently, we didn't have much of a partnership between the two agencies, but now that's definitely improving. And Jeff just agreed to add some specific language to his guidelines about critical aquifer recharge areas, sole source aquifers, and adding some points associated with that. So that's really exciting. The application and guidelines I mentioned earlier have wellhead protection language and scoring criteria in them, public health protection language as well. In terms of evaluation, the Department of Ecology sends their draft ranked list to my agency for comment and factors in our comments into their final ranked funding list. And as I mentioned before, this is a single funding list that includes both their infrastructure projects and their non-point projects. That actually streamlines the process quite a bit. And then I guess we'll go to the next slide. Dan? I wanted to end up with some incentives, and I think these have sort of been touched on a little bit by the other speakers, but we found that there are four main incentives to help applicants understand the benefits of using this funding for non-point pollution projects. One of the incentives that really works well is to convey the economic benefits of doing non-point pollution to the potential applicants, emphasizing how utilities and customers can economically benefit from source water protection projects up front, and then also providing, if possible, providing some grant money or some forgivable loan, especially to economically disadvantaged communities. Another economic incentive would be to help communities improve their rate base. We found that this is a real barrier for communities to apply, especially small communities, to apply for loan funding, if they can't pay it back, they don't want to apply. And if we can provide some help up front for them to improve their rate base so that they can apply and then have a successful project, that's a very important emphasis, I think. Also, another incentive would be to simplify the application process, and that's something Jeff's program has definitely done, seeking ways to clarify the guidelines, streamline the process, have it online and automated if possible. And then also streamlining the contract process, just trying to make it as easy as possible, especially for those small disadvantaged communities. And then the last incentive we think is really important is to arrange for some technical assistance for those small communities that can really benefit from Nonpoint projects who may not ordinarily apply. If they have some technical assistance up front to improve their rate base and also to understand how to structure their project, that can really go a long way. And the types of organizations we rely on for technical assistance include local conservation districts, rural water, our rural water affiliate is extremely helpful, Rural Community Assistance Corporation here in Washington State, or RCAP in other states, and then our own agencies, regional staff, our technical staff at the Department of Ecology and at Department of Health can provide technical assistance to applicants. So those are the incentives I'll leave you with. And then the last slide has our contact information if you want to contact either one of us about these examples or the incentives or the application process.
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you very much. That was great. Well, that pretty much concludes the webinar for today. I am throwing up one more poll question, so if you have a quick second before you get off the phone, I want to say thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you so much for giving your time freely to do this for us, and thank you for everyone who called in today. Special thanks to ASDWA for helping out getting this program put together, and finally, again, thank you to EPA for the funding for this and other source water projects. I'll be emailing out answers to the questions that were submitted. That'll probably be late next week. All the staff here are going to be gone for a conference next week, so when I'm back in the office next week, if you have any follow-up questions, you can email them to me, dyates@gwpc.org, or feel free to give me a call, 405-516-4972. So that's it for today. Thanks, everybody. I'd ask ASDWA staff to stay on the line for a couple seconds, and then any speakers who have any questions to stay on the line. Thank you.